All right, everyone. Want to welcome you to another edition of Commish Notes. This week we will be recapping Week 14 and previewing Week 15. It took 14 weeks, but the wagons have finally been circled as PRC throttles the Marlins 139.88 to 68.80. PRC had 8 out of 9 players exceed projections and go for double digits. Standouts included Cam Newton, who for the second time in 3 weeks went for 41-plus points, and Mike Wallace, whose 23.2 points exceeded his point total from the last 4 weeks by 10.1 points. Darren McFadden returned from injury to post 12.4 points while also managing to re-injure his ankle, while pickup of the week, fourth-string running back Montel Owens scored 16.2 points. The lone disappointment for PRC was Jermichael Finley, who only managed 1.6 points. Fun fact, Finley's 1.6 is only the 5th lowest total he has scored this season. The Marlins continue their march towards the skirt, putting up a robust 68.8 points. Evidently, Denario Alexander did not get the message to tank it this week, scoring 20.8 points, accounting for 30% of the Marlins scoring. The deadly two-headed Bills running back monster of C.J. Spiller and Fred Jackson managed a combined 6.2 points, which would have been good for 37th best this week, slotted behind 8 backup running backs in the NFL. In particular, Fred Jackson continues his great season with a 1-point effort, good for 71st this week, almost outscoring Ryan Grant, who came off the street to score 1.3 points this week for the Green Bay Packers. Not to be outdone, Kyle Rudolph managed to put up his third 0-point performance of the season, tying him for 49th with former Cowboy David LaFleur and former Panther Chris Mangum. This week's matchup between Who's Your Daddy and Roe Malicious is brought to you by Tempur-Pedic Pillows, who encourage you to build your best night's sleep with the pillow that's perfect for you. Who's Your Daddy pulls off a thrilling 70.56 to 60.82 victory over Roe Malicious to avoid the skirt game. Who's Your Daddy received double-digit performances from 2 out of 9 players, with David Akers and Sean Green as the only players to exceed projections. Greg Jennings did not believe in his smell, as he only scored 2.7 points, which tied him for 79th this week with Jets standout receiver Chaz Schillens. Not to be outdone, Brandon Pettigrew followed up his first double-digit performance with a 0, tying him with the aforementioned Kyle Rudolph, along with former Bill Jay Reamersma and former Raider Ricky Dudley. Roe Malicious' free fall continues. It's hard to believe that Roe Malicious went from competing for a playoff spot to playing for the skirt in a matter of 2 weeks. Roe Malicious failed to have a single player meet projections, and as a team they came up 40 points short. Team captain Tony Romo continues to lead the team in scoring with 14.72 points, but unfortunately it was not enough. There are lots of other mediocre performances to note, but nothing Commish Notes worthy, with the exception of mentioning Legatron's 1-point performance, which is his third 1-point performance of the season. Fun fact, if Roe Malicious would have started the Giants defense, they would have defeated Who's Your Daddy by 1 point this week. Now moving on to the games that matter, we will begin with the upset of the week as the Fussies exploded for 141.48 points in their victory over Wide Right. The Fussies received double-digit efforts from 6 out of 9 players, and perhaps even more impressive, the lowest score of the week was Lawrence Tynes, who scored 7 points. Aaron Hernandez, 17.8 points, was his highest total of the season, while Matt Ryan put up his best total since Week 10 with 23.68. Both of those solid performances were overshadowed by the Seahawks defense, who scored an insane 41 points against the Cardinals. To put that performance into perspective, that was the 5th highest fantasy performance this year regardless of position. Wide Right's elimination was a bitter pill to swallow, considering the 22.7-point explosion he received from Noshawn Moreno on Thursday night. Rob also received double-digit efforts from Andrew Luck, Victor Cruz, Randall Cobb, and the Paralegal. Unfortunately, Luck could not take advantage of his plump matchup against the Titans, scoring 10.54 points, which was only good for 25th this week, while Eli Manning lit it up on his bench for 30.06. Equally terrible, Ahmad Bradshaw finished with 3.3 points, good for 47th this week, behind the likes of Mike Tolbert, former star running back for PRC Danny Woodhead, and DeJuan Harris, who was signed 8 days ago by the Packers. while Darren Sproles in his 20.4 points was getting a back massage from Eli Manning on wide right's bench. Look on the bright side, Rob. Even if you would have started both players, you still would have lost by 13.72 points this week because Antonio Gates still sucks. In our second quarterfinal match, the Ball and Click took down the Ramrodders in a 131.7 to 91.22 victory. The Ball and Click received double-digit efforts from 6 out of 9 players, including a combined 71.1 points from the running back and flex positions, which would have been good enough to outscore Who's Your Daddy, the Marlins, and Romalicious this week. Fun fact, through Week 14, Adrian Peterson is the number 1 ranked running back in fantasy with 231.1 points, while Fred Jackson is ranked 30th with 81.4. Joel, regardless on the skirt game next week, I want to congratulate you on by far being the worst fantasy football player this season. The Cleveland Browns proved to be a solid pickup, finishing second in Week 14 amongst all defenses with 17 points. Other contributors include Akeem Nicks, who had his third double-digit game of the season, and Jared Cook, who doubled his projection with 8 points. After Thursday night, the Ramrodders had a liter of cola on ice to celebrate the victory, but unfortunately the momentum set up on Thursday fell flat on Sunday. The Ramrodders only received double-digit efforts from 3 out of 9 players, with only 2 players exceeding projections, Frank Gore and Matt Prater. Aaron Rodgers continues his downward spiral, scoring 18 points under projection. This is the 4th consecutive week in a row Rodgers failed to break the 20-point barrier. Perhaps Mr. Hubble is right. Aaron Rodgers does have self-esteem issues. After only having 4 games this week, we have a full lineup of games. We'll begin with the matchups of least significance. In a rematch of the Who Cares game, we have Who's Your Daddy taking on Who Dat. I'll take Who Dat to roll even if RG3 can't play. POC looks to make it 2 in a row and a 3rd consecutive week of scoring at least 100 points, while the Utes are still licking their wounds over the Week 13 loss to the Fussies. I'll take the Utes to win and move on to the best of the worst matchup with Who Dat. In our 5th place game, we have Wide Right taking on the Ramrodders. With both teams looking to tank, I think the Ramrodders bench is worse than Wide Right, so I'm taking Wide Right to win and the Ramrodders to come out as the real winners. In our first semifinals match, we have the scrappy Fussy Dusties over the Heavy Hitters. Could this matchup mirror Rocky IV with Rocky Balboa defeating Ivan Drago? I must say this matchup is eerily similar. I fully expect a replay of Rocky IV with the Fussies playing the role of Apollo Creed and getting killed by the Heavy Hitters. In a rematch of the most sex appeal, we have America's team, the Syracuse's Man Boobs, taking on the Ball and Click. The Click humbled the Man Boobs in Week 10 with a 32-point beatdown. Revenge has been the talk around the Man Boobs locker room this week. That added motivation will be enough to send the Man Boobs to the championship game, and I'm also projecting that they will exceed projections for the first time this season. In the matchup everyone has been waiting for, the Marlins take on the Romalicious in the battle for the skirt. All signs are pointing towards a blowout victory for Romalicious, and I've got to say I agree. I'm predicting Romalicious to win by 30-plus points, sending Joel to the skirt, and trading his number 1 pick to Big Mike for a box of rocks and the 8th running back Big Mike will select in next year's draft. That's all I've got for you this week. As always, hope you enjoyed. Looking forward to recap next week's matchups, and I'll see you next week.